I was born from wood that once sang with the wind. Before I became a violin, I was a tree, tall, free, and untouched by the noise of men. Then, hands carved me into something that could speak without words. In a small workshop in Warsaw, a craftsman hummed softly while shaping my curves. He believed that every violin carried a soul, and that mine would play for peace. The world outside his window was already changing. Whispers of conflict drifted through the streets, but inside his shop there was only melody. Every stroke of his blade was careful, reverent, as if he knew he was building more than an instrument. He varnished me under the amber light of late afternoon, his reflection trembling on my polished body. When I was finally complete, he held me to his ear, plucked a single string, and smiled. I remember that moment vividly, a silence so pure that it almost felt holy. He named me Esperanza, hope. And for a time, that as what I was, a voice of hope in a city that was beginning to tremble. The first time I felt fear, it wasn't from silence, it was from sound. Not music, but thunder. Not rain, but bombs. Warsaw's sky cracked open one morning in September 1939, and everything that had once been human began to sound mechanical. The hum of engines, the echo of boots, the scream of sirens. The man who built me, my craftsman, ran to hide me in a case of dark leather. His hands trembled and his eyes, once warm with melody, now reflected the glow of fire outside the window. He whispered, "You must survive this, Esperanza." And for a moment, I thought he might be wrong. The air was filled with smoke and fear. The shop that once smelled of pine and varnish now reeked of ash. Wood burned like paper. Walls crumbled like old memories. He tried to escape carrying me, but the streets had already turned into chaos. People screaming, running, falling. He fell too. I remember the impact. The world turning upside down as I hit the ground inside the case. Through a crack in the leather, I saw his hand, still reaching toward me, before dust swallowed everything. When the silence returned, it wasn't peace, it was the kind of silence that forgets what joy sounds like. Days passed, maybe weeks. I lay beneath rubble, wrapped in darkness, listening to the faint cries of a city dying above me, and yet, somehow, I didn't break. My strings were tight, my body cracked but whole. I was waiting, not for rescue, but for meaning. Because even in the ruins, a violin that once sang of hope could not forget its purpose. It was winter when he found me. Snow covered what used to be streets, and silence had become the city's only survivor. I lay buried beneath stone and dust, a coffin for melodies that no one remembered. Then I heard footsteps, small ones. Careful, a child's breath echoed above the ruins, quick and afraid, but filled with something stronger than fear, curiosity. He moved a piece of wood, then another. When his fingers brushed against my case, I felt warmth for the first time in months. He opened it. Light fell over me like a memory of the sun. He wasn't more than 10 years old. His coat was torn, his eyes hollow but alive. He touched my strings, and I swear, the air changed. One note, fragile and trembling, escaped into the cold. It was imperfect, but it lived. He smiled, the kind of smile that defies death. From that day, he carried me everywhere, strapped across his thin shoulders like a secret he couldn't afford to lose. He played for bread, for coins, for silence. But sometimes, he played just to remember. Each night, inside a broken building, he'd rest his head against me after the last note, whispering stories of his mother, of a home that no longer stood, of dreams that still refused to die. In his hands, I wasn't just wood and string. I was a promise, a fragile rebellion against the darkness. And every song he played stitched a little more life into both of us. Music had returned, not in concert halls or grand stages, but in the trembling hands of a boy who had lost everything, yet still found something worth singing for. The night he played for the first time in public wasn't planned. It began with hunger. A few survivors had gathered in what remained of an old train station. Hollow walls, no roof, just the echo of rain and the memory of departures. The boy stood there, clutching me as if I were both shield and sword. His eyes scanned the faces around him. Old men with trembling hands, women holding children that didn't cry anymore, soldiers without uniforms or purpose, ghosts of the living. He didn't speak. He simply lifted the bow. And when the first note echoed through the hollow station, time stopped. It wasn't a melody of beauty. It was raw, cracked, bleeding. Each vibration carried smoke, grief, and the last heartbeat of the fallen. But beneath that, there was something else, a pulse of life refusing to vanish. The people listened, at first in disbelief, then in silence, and finally in tears. An old woman pressed her hands together, whispering prayers between sobs. A soldier looked down, hiding his face. Even the rain softened as if the sky itself was listening. He played until his fingers bled, until my strings cried under the strain. And when he finished, no one clapped. They just sat there, breathing, alive, as if remembering how. That night, the station turned into a cathedral. The ruins became sacred ground, not because of who stood there, but because of what was heard there. The music didn't rebuild walls, it rebuilt hearts. And I, an instrument of war, once drowned in silence, became a vessel of peace again. The ghosts that haunted those ruins finally bowed to something greater than sorrow: sound. Word travels strangely in war. It doesn't need newspapers or radios, just whispers. And the whispers about the boy and his violin spread through the ruins of Warsaw like the smoke that never left the sky. They said there was music in the old station. Music that didn't belong to any flag, any side, any hatred. Music that could make even the most broken soul remember it was once human. One morning, as the sun tried weakly to rise through the ash-colored clouds, I saw them. Soldiers. The same kind of men who had turned homes into dust and laughter into silence. Their boots echoed on the cobblestones. Slow, hesitant, they didn't come shouting. They came listening. The boy froze when he saw them. His hands trembled. I could feel his heart hammering through the wood of my frame. For a second, the world held its breath, the sound of war meeting the silence of fear. Then, one of the soldiers, young, barely older than the boy, raised his hand. Not to fire, but to signal the others to stop. And in a voice softer than the winter wind, he said, "Play." The boy hesitated. His lips parted, but no words came. He looked around, the faces of the survivors behind him, the rifles before him. Then he closed his eyes and raised the bow. The first note rose, fragile as a candle flame. It wavered in the air, threatened to die, and then grew, stronger, braver. I sang. The soldiers lowered their weapons. One of them took off his helmet. Another sat down on a broken step, staring at nothing. The music wrapped around them like fog, like forgiveness, like something older than war. Some cried silently. Others smiled through tears they didn't understand. For a few minutes, maybe 5, maybe forever, enemies forgot who they were supposed to be. They were just men, standing in the ruins, listening to a child play hope through wood and string. When the last note faded, the air didn't move. No one spoke. Then, slowly, one soldier stepped forward. He reached into his coat, pulled out a medal, and placed it beside the boy. He didn't say a word, just nodded and walked away. I didn't know if it was an act of surrender or salvation, but I knew that something sacred had happened. In a city built on ashes, music had made soldiers human again. And I, a violin that once sang in peace, had played my part in rewriting war. Peace never stays long in places built from fire. For a few days, maybe weeks, the ruins of Warsaw felt alive again. Children laughed softly between walls that still smelled of smoke. Mothers whispered lullabies that had almost been forgotten, and every evening the boy would play. Sometimes for 10 people, sometimes for no one but the wind. But war doesn't like beauty. It hunts it. The morning the fire returned, the sky was red before the sun even rose. Engines rumbled in the distance, deeper and angrier than thunder. The boy heard it first, that metallic growl that had already stolen everything once before. He held me tighter, as if the sound itself could snatch me away. Then came the sirens, and after the sirens, the bombs. The earth shook, glass screamed. Flames clawed at the city like beasts freed from their cages. He ran through alleys, jumping over rubble, my body clutched against his chest. Every explosion threw him forward, dust blinding his eyes, ash clinging to his tears. "Don't let go," I wanted to whisper, but I could only vibrate softly with his heartbeat, a rhythm faster than any song we ever played. He reached the train station again, or what was left of it. The roof had caved in, the old tracks twisted like ribs. He hid behind a fallen beam, panting, coughing, trembling. Around him, the world burned. I could feel his fear. But beneath it, I also felt something else, the pulse of defiance. The same pulse that had made him play when soldiers surrounded him. The same pulse that made the weak rise when silence became unbearable. He looked down at me, his fingers tracing the cracks in my wood. Then he said softly, between sobs, "If they take everything again, they won't take you." He wrapped me in his coat and placed me inside a broken chest under the rubble. His hands lingered on me one last time. "I'll come back," he whispered. "I promise." Then he was gone. His footsteps faded into the chaos. The fire came. The chest grew hot, too hot. The air screamed, timbers fell, dust filled the world. But somehow, I survived. Buried beneath ashes, I waited. I waited for the footsteps that never returned. I waited for the promise that burned away with everything else. And in that waiting, I learned what eternity feels like. Years passed, then decades. The war ended, but the silence never did. Above me, the city rebuilt itself. New walls rose where memories once stood. Children played where soldiers had fallen. Warsaw began to hum again, a quieter song, but alive. And I slept beneath it all, under bricks, ashes, and the ghosts of everything I once knew. Wood shouldn't last that long, but I did. Maybe because I was more than wood. Maybe because sound, true sound, never really dies? It was a rainy afternoon when they found me. A team of restoration workers digging foundations for a new building hit something hard. They thought it was debris, a beam, maybe. But when the dust cleared, they saw the curve of my body, cracked, blackened, but unmistakably a violin. One of them, a young woman, brushed the dirt from my surface. Her touch was gentle, careful, reverent, like the craftsman's hands so many lifetimes ago. She called for others, and soon a small crowd gathered. Someone whispered, "It's from the war." Another said, "Look, it's still whole." They carried me away as if I were sacred, wrapped in cloth, hidden from the rain. And for the first time in 80 years, I saw the sky again. In the museum's sterile light, experts studied me like a relic. They photographed every burn mark, traced every crack. They murmured about craftsmanship, about survival, about history. But none of them knew the song inside me, the one that had turned ruins into a cathedral. Then the young woman, the one who found me, held me close. She tilted her head, as if listening to something no one else could hear, and I swear for a moment she did. Her eyes softened. She smiled faintly and whispered, "You must have a story." Oh, if only she knew. They placed me in a glass case, silent, admired, untouchable. Visitors passed by, reading the plaque beneath me. Violin recovered from the Warsaw ruins, 1943. But behind that glass, I longed to be more than history. I wanted to breathe again, to vibrate, to sing. And one evening, someone heard that longing. It was her, the same woman who had found me. The museum was closing, lights dimming, and rain tapping softly against the windows. She walked up to my case, eyes glimmering with something between curiosity and faith. Then she whispered to the guard, "Please, just one note." They hesitated, but something in her voice made them nod. Carefully, they lifted me from my glass coffin. Her hands trembled as she held me, not from fear, but from awe. The bow was drawn slowly across my strings. At first, nothing, just air, silence, and then a faint vibration, a tone, fragile and ghostly, rising from the depths of time. It cracked, broke, then found itself again. That sound, it wasn't perfect, it was scarred, trembling, alive. The melody that escaped wasn't one written on paper. It was memory, the echo of the boy who played me in the ruins, the warmth of his hands, the fear in his chest, the tears he never let fall. His spirit, the one that refused to die, returned through me. The woman stopped playing and stood still. Her eyes filled with tears, her breath caught in her throat. "It sounds like crying," she said softly. And maybe she was right, because I wasn't playing music that night. I was speaking, and every person who heard me in that empty hall listened not with their ears, but with their hearts. They returned me to the glass case, but something had changed. The air around me was different, alive again. The silence no longer felt like a prison, but like a cathedral built to protect the sound that had once escaped me. People came every day. Some stayed only seconds. Others stood motionless, staring as if they could hear what wasn't there. Because maybe they could. When they looked at me, they didn't just see an old violin. They saw every soul that had refused to disappear, every song that war tried to silence, every hand that once trembled in both fear and hope. And though I can no longer move, I've learned something that flesh forgets and wood remembers. That memory is not in the body, but in the echo. The woman who played me still visits sometimes. She never touches the glass. She only closes her eyes. And in that moment, I swear she hears it. The faint hum of my strings, the heartbeat of a child who believed beauty could survive even amidst ashes. Because music never truly dies. It lingers, invisible, weaving itself into the hearts of those who dare to listen. And so I remain here, a relic, a witness, a voice carved in silence. I am not the violin of a lost boy anymore. I am the echo of every song that refused to fade. And as long as someone remembers, I still play.